process of data mining. So here are the steps in data mining, and I'm not going to go through this. Your textbook explains these quite well, and I'm going to let you read this section in the textbook. Okay, but we will be um, using SAS Enterprise Miner to do some of these steps, like um, obtain data, clean data, reduce the data using transformation, and partition the data. And all of these different steps, we will be using these steps or performing these steps in Enterprise Miner. And SAS itself uses what is called SEMA, and this SEMA is sample, explore, modify, model, and assess. These are the 5 different groups of commands that SAS uses. Okay, let's look at Enterprise Miner. Okay, so here are the different tabs, right? And under each tab, we have a bunch of commands. So sample, explore, modify, model, and assess. So that's what SEMA is. And then of course we have some utilities and other things that we will use some of these, not all of them. But this is the core capability of SAS. Okay. Sample, explore, modify, model, and assess. Okay, so how to do a sample and do partition, and how to explore the data and explore to understand the data and figure out what kind of modifications are necessary, or what kind of cleaning is necessary. And then whatever that you determine through the explore, you want to do those modifications. Like if a variable is skewed and you want to transform it so that it will have a kind of a nice distribution, you can use some transform commands. Or if you have missing values, and how to handle those missing values, and that's called impute missing values. Then model is where you fit a predictive model. So it can be a regression model, decision tree, neural networks, or KNN, K nearest neighbor, and so on. So they have lots of models. Then assess is where you would assess the model and how well the model is doing. So these are the 5 categories of commands that forms the bedrock of SAS, Enterprise Miner. So preliminary steps in data mining. So you have organizing data and pre-processing and cleaning data. Okay, so these 2 are the important steps before you can start actually doing any analysis. So first, organizing data is sampling and rare event oversampling, and then pre-processing and cleaning is where you take the variables and create new variables out of it. Okay, so let's look at the sampling and rare event oversampling. Okay, so sampling is when data mining doesn't need billions and billions of records, even though you may have access to billions of records. So when you have huge databases, you can randomly sample a smaller database, maybe 1,000,000 records, or maybe 100,000 records, and then use that for analysis. Now, algorithms and models are typically applied to a sample because of the size. If it's a huge, humongous database, then the analysis is going to take a lot of time, computer time, and it's not needed. The algorithms will execute faster with smaller samples. Okay, and once you develop the model, then you can use it to score new observations in the larger database. Okay. Applying the model to a very large database containing billions of records, okay, you're just going to compute, do the prediction using the model. That's not going to take a lot of time. That can be fun. But the analysis and developing the model can take a lot of time. That's why you use sampling. Now, rare event oversampling is when you have a a variable, a target variable that has very few events. So event here represents the event of interest. So for example, if you are say Medicare payment system, then you have lots of claims that come in. Okay, and some of the claims are fraudulent. So you want to be able to figure out which claims are fraudulent. But usually 99.9% of the claims are genuine claims. There are only very few claims which are fraudulent. So that is what is called a rare event. So when you have a rare event like that, even if you have a large database, since there are only very few event records, your model will not perform well. And therefore, what we need to do is to have as many of those rare events included in the sample, an equal number of other records which are non-events are added. So you will have in the sample a large proportion, maybe 50% of the records are event records. So that is what is called rare event oversampling. You oversample the rare event, which is which is very few records in the database. So you have 100,000 records, or only about 5,000 are events, right? It's a very small number. So you take all the 5,000 events, so you're oversampling the events, and then you take an equal number of non-events. So now in the sample, 50% of the observations are events. So when you do that, then when you go back later, after developing the model, then you have to adjust when you're evaluating the models against one against another. You have to adjust for the fact that you oversampled, and there are ways of doing that, and we will discuss that in a later chapter. So for right now, you need to understand what rare event oversampling is.